Retired mechanic bought abandoned alien base to die in? But, when the real owner appeared, his heart found its turning point as Harold connected the final power conduit to Zella's damaged ship. With trembling hands, he sealed the crystalline connection, risking catastrophic fusion core failure. The vessel surged to life, systems cascading with energy, and in that triumphant moment, the stubborn old mechanic rediscovered his purpose in the stars. The lone dome perched on endless copper dunes beneath twin suns, its weathered surface glinting in the harsh afternoon light. Harold Finch adjusted his tattered utility vest, the countless pockets bulging with tools accumulated over 7 decades of fixing everything from Earth-made antigrav panels to Sechin warp drives. His 74-year-old frame moved with deliberate care as he leaned on his walking stick, fashioned from the thigh bone of some extinct alien predator, and surveyed his new kingdom. "What do you think, Spike?" he asked the potted barrel cactus, nestled in the crook of his arm. "Not bad for a final resting place, eh?" The cactus, as always, offered no opinion. But Harold found comfort in the silent companionship. Spike had been with him through 3 systems and 17 repair contracts. The little plant had outlasted 2 ex-wives and countless thankless clients. Harold punched a 12-digit code into the universal lock. The hatch hissed open, releasing a stale gust of processed air. He'd purchased this abandoned Galbonian outpost, Gamma 14, according to the faded markings, through a questionable broker on Titan Station. The price had been suspiciously low, but Harold wasn't complaining. His meager retirement fund wouldn't have stretched to cover anything better, and this remote location was precisely what he wanted. No more repair calls at all hours. No more ungrateful customers expecting miracles from ancient machinery. No more corporations squeezing every drop of expertise from his brain without fair compensation. Just him, Spike, and whatever piece he could salvage in his remaining years. Inside, the dome was surprisingly spacious. The previous occupants, whoever they had been, had left behind remnants of their presence. Defunct star charts painted across the ceiling in luminescent pigment. Strange geometric furnishings that adjusted to his human frame when he settled into them, and an environmental control system that hummed back to life at his touch. The broker had claimed the station had been abandoned for over 30 Earth years. Something about a research mission gone wrong. Harold hadn't pried. The fewer questions asked, the better the deal. He placed Spike on a shelf, near what appeared to be a viewport, and began unpacking his meager possessions. Tools came first, organized meticulously in drawers and on magnetic strips along the wall. Then the bottles of homebrew he'd been perfecting, a potent malt liquor infused with desert flora from his previous posting. Finally, he set up his writing station. The memoir had been his project for years. The Reluctant Fixer, 7 decades of impossible repairs. The manuscript was half-finished, filled with tales of engineering marvels and disasters alike. He'd saved lives with hasty repairs to failing life support systems. He'd rescued fortunes by coaxing ancient mining equipment back to productivity. Once, he'd even prevented an interstellar incident by fixing a diplomatic vessel's translation matrix minutes before a crucial treaty signing. All those stories, and still he felt empty, used up, ready for whatever came next. Harold programmed the universal lock with a new code, the opening bars of an Earth pop song from his youth, and settled into the adjustable chair with a grunt of satisfaction. "Home, sweet home, Spike," he murmured, pouring himself a generous glass of homebrew. "Nobody to bother us here, just you, me, and enough supplies to last until the end. No more fixing broken things. No more emergency calls. Just peace and quiet." He took a long drink and watched the twin suns set through the viewport, casting the copper desert in a bloody glow. To retirement, he toasted the empty room. The dome's automatic systems dimmed the lights as darkness fell. Harold found the sleeping compartment, a surprisingly comfortable chamber with a bed that molded to his aching back. For the first time in decades, he fell asleep without setting an alarm. without the nagging worry of what crisis might demand his attention in the morning. Just blessed, empty silence. The alarm came at precisely 3:42 a.m. Standard Earth Time. It wasn't a gentle chime or musical tone, but a blaring, pulsing screech that jolted Harold from the deepest sleep he'd enjoyed in years. The dome's interior strobed with red emergency lighting. "What the—" He fumbled for his glasses, knocking over a half-empty bottle of homebrew in the process. The floor beneath him vibrated with a wet thump, as though something massive had collided with the sand outside. Another thump followed, then a prolonged scraping sound that seemed to circle the dome's perimeter. Harold grabbed his multi-tool from beneath his pillow, an old mechanic's habit, and stumbled toward the hatch in his undershirt and mismatched socks. The security monitor beside the lock showed nothing but swirling sand. Yet the pounding continued. 3 sharp raps against the hatch made him jump. "Who's there?" Harold called, his voice cracking with disuse. No answer came, only more insistent pounding. With a muttered curse, Harold overrode the lock. The hatch slid open, letting in a blast of frigid night air and sand. Silhouetted against the starlit darkness stood a figure, tall, slender, and decidedly not human. "You are occupying my property," said a cool, modulated voice. "Vacate immediately." Harold squinted through the gloom. The figure stepped forward into the dome's red emergency lighting, revealing green-tinged skin that pulsed with bioluminescent patterns, like a nightclub floor transformed into flesh. The alien was female, as far as he could tell, with a crest of dark tendrils instead of hair and eyes that reflected light like a cat's. "I purchased this outpost fair and square," Harold said, brandishing his multi-tool. He was suddenly, acutely aware that he was confronting an unknown alien entity while wearing nothing but an undershirt and boxers. "I have the documentation to prove it." The green-skinned woman tilted her head. Her eyes narrowed to slits. "You have been defrauded, human. This is Outpost Gamma 14, property of the Galbonian Research Consortium. I am Senior Researcher Zella, and I have returned to continue my work." Harold felt a cold knot form in his stomach. He'd feared something like this might happen. It explained the suspiciously low price, but he'd hoped to at least enjoy a few months of peace before any complications arose. "Look," he said, trying to sound reasonable. "I've invested everything I have left in this place. I'm just an old man looking for somewhere quiet to finish my days. Surely there are other outposts." "This specific location contains my research equipment," Zella interrupted, her luminous skin flashing with patterns that somehow conveyed irritation. "The dome's geopositioning is crucial to my ongoing project." "Then, your consortium should have maintained a presence here," Harold shot back. "It's been abandoned for decades. Salvage rights." 32 of your Earth years, Zella corrected. A brief interlude necessitated by regulatory complications. The property was never abandoned, merely temporarily vacated. She stepped fully inside, the hatch sealing automatically behind her. Harold backed away, his hand tightening around his multi-tool. Not that it would do much good against whatever technology she might possess. "I'm not leaving," he said, summoning what dignity he could while standing in his underwear. "I've nowhere else to go." Zella's skin rippled with what might have been amusement or contempt. "Your departure is non-negotiable. However, I am authorized to offer compensation for your inconvenience." Harold's jaw set stubbornly. "I don't want compensation. I want peace and quiet. I've spent my entire life fixing other people's problems. I bought this place to get away from all that, to die in peace when my time comes." The alien researcher regarded him with those reflective eyes, her head tilting to the other side. "Interesting. You are a mechanic?" "Was," Harold corrected. "Retired now." Zella's skin pulsed with rapid patterns. She seemed to be calculating something. "A fortuitous coincidence. My vessel has sustained damage during atmospheric entry. The onboard fabricator, can produce replacement components, but installation requires manual intervention. Harold crossed his arms. Not my problem. It could become your problem very quickly, Zella said, her voice dropping to a dangerous octave. Outpost regulations permit sterilization protocols for unauthorized occupants. Are you threatening me? I am stating facts. However, I am also authorized to negotiate. Your skills for my forbearance. Help repair my vessel, and I will delay your eviction until suitable alternative arrangements can be made. Harold glared at her. It was happening again. Someone with a problem they couldn't solve, expecting him to work miracles. But what choice did he have? Fine, he growled. But I work on my own terms. No rush jobs. And I'll need a full diagnostic before I touch anything. Zella's skin flashed with rapid pulses. Acceptable. We depart at first light. She moved to a corner of the dome and settled into a cross-legged position, apparently entering some kind of meditative state. Her eyes remained open, unblinking, fixed on Harold. Great, he muttered, retreating to his sleeping compartment. Just great. Sleep eluded him for the rest of the night. He lay awake, staring at the ceiling, cursing his luck and the dishonest broker who'd sold him this outpost. By the time the first of the twin suns crested the horizon, Harold had resigned himself to his fate. He dressed in his most durable work clothes, packed his tool belt with everything he might need, and downed a full mug of synthetic coffee. Keep an eye on the place, Spike, he told the cactus as he filled its water reservoir. Don't let her touch anything while I'm gone. Zella was waiting by the hatch, her green skin now muted to a dull olive in daylight. She wore what appeared to be a form-fitting environmental suit, complete with an array of instruments attached to a belt around her slender waist. Your vegetation communicates? She asked, gesturing toward Spike. Only with me, Harold replied gruffly. Let's get this over with. The alien nodded and opened the hatch. Blinding sunlight and scorching heat immediately assaulted them. Zella handed him a thin, reflective cloak. For solar protection, she explained. The walk is approximately 3 kilometers. My vessel is partially submerged in a dune field east of here. Harold donned the cloak grudgingly. It was surprisingly effective, instantly cooling his skin despite the rising temperature outside. They set off across the rippling copper sands, Zella moving with the fluid grace of a being adapted to higher gravity. Harold followed more slowly, leaning on his alien bone walking stick and cursing under his breath with each difficult step. The twin suns climbed higher, their combined glare turning the horizon into a shimmering mirage. So what exactly are you researching out here? Harold asked, after nearly an hour of silent trudging. Zella's pace didn't falter. The geomagnetic anomalies of this planet's core interact with solar radiation to produce unique particle effects. My work involves harnessing these effects for practical applications. Weapons research? She turned those reflective eyes on him. Energy production. My species abandoned destructive technologies millennia ago. Wish I could say the same for mine, Harold muttered. They crested a particularly steep dune, and Zella stopped, pointing. Below them, half buried in copper sand, lay a sleek vessel, unlike any ship Harold had ever seen. It resembled a massive teardrop, its surface a deep blue-black that absorbed light rather than reflecting it. A jagged gash ran along one side, exposing internal components. Impressive, he admitted reluctantly. What's powering it? A contained fusion emulator core, Zella replied. A miniature star, essentially. Harold's professional interest was piqued despite himself. Stable containment at that scale? That's decades beyond anything humans have achieved. 173 of your years, to be precise. There was a hint of pride in her modulated voice. The damage, however, affects the power distribution network. The core itself is stable, but energy cannot reach critical systems. They made their way down to the ship, up close. It was even more impressive, perhaps 80 meters from bow to stern, with no visible external propulsion systems. Zella placed her palm against an unmarked section of the hull, and a portion of the surface simply dissolved, creating an entranceway. "After you," she said. Harold hesitated only briefly before stepping inside. The interior was dimly lit by emergency systems, revealing a space that seemed impossibly large for the ship's external dimensions. "Spatial folding," Zella explained, noting his confusion. "The internal volume exists partially in another dimension." "Of course it does," Harold said dryly. The ship's corridors were curved and smooth, without the angular junctions and exposed conduits he was accustomed to in human vessels. Everything had an organic quality, as though the ship had been grown rather than built. Zella led him to what appeared to be the engineering section, a spherical chamber dominated by a transparent containment field. Within it, a tiny sun burned with white-hot intensity. "The fusion core," she said unnecessarily. Surrounding the core were control interfaces, unlike anything Harold had worked with before. No buttons, switches, or screens, just smooth surfaces with occasional pulses of light racing beneath them. "How am I supposed to interface with this?" he asked. In answer, Zella pressed her palm to a particular section of the wall. A compartment opened, revealing what looked like a headset. "Neural interface," she explained. "It will translate your thoughts into commands the system can understand." Harold eyed the device skeptically. "You want to connect my brain directly to your alien technology?" "Not a chance." "The connection is one way," Zella assured him. "The system reads. It cannot write. Your thoughts remain your own." Still dubious, Harold set down his tool belt and removed several specialized instruments. "I'll do this the old-fashioned way first. Let me run a diagnostic." He approached the damaged section of the ship, where the hull breach had exposed bundles of what appeared to be crystalline conduits. Selecting a multi-spectrum analyzer from his belt, he began scanning the components. The analyzer buzzed angrily, then went dark, dead. Harold frowned and tried another tool. It sparked in his hand, forcing him to drop it. "Your equipment is incompatible with the ship's atmosphere," Zella observed. "The neural interface is calibrated for cross-species use. It remains your only viable option." Harold glared at her, then at his useless tools. 7 decades of experience, and he was being forced to rely on alien tech he didn't understand. But what choice did he have? "Fine," he grumbled, picking up the headset. "But if I end up with tentacles growing out of my ears, I'm holding you personally responsible." The device settled over his temples, like a lightweight crown. For a moment, nothing happened. Then a flood of information cascaded through his consciousness. Schematics, diagnostic data, material compositions, all somehow instantly comprehensible, despite their alien origin. "Whoa!" Harold breathed. The ship was indeed powered by a miniature star, a fusion reaction contained within a field of pure energy. The damaged power distribution network consisted of crystalline conduits that channeled the star's energy throughout the vessel. Microscopic fractures had developed across multiple sections, causing power leaks and system failures. "I can see it all," he said, surprised. "The conduits have microfractures, thousands of them. The ship's self-repair systems are trying to fix them, but they can't keep up." Zella's skin pulsed with approval. "Can you effect repairs?" Harold walked slowly around the engineering section, his mind processing the flood of data. "Maybe. The fabricator. Is it functional?" "Operating at reduced capacity," Zella confirmed. "Sufficient for small components." Harold concentrated, and the neural interface showed him the fabricator's specifications. It could indeed create replacement conduits, if properly instructed. "I need to redesign these conduits," he said, fingers moving in the air, as though manipulating invisible objects. Through the interface, he was actually adjusting technical specifications in the ship's system. The original design has a structural weakness, where the crystal lattice meets the power junction. If we modify the internal geometry, his decades of experience with countless technologies flowed through the interface. The ship's AI, previously dormant, awoke to assist, offering material suggestions and stress analyses as Harold worked. It was unlike any engineering experience he'd ever had. Intuitive, almost artistic. "There," he said finally. "That should work. Let's fabricate a test section." The fabricator hummed to life, producing a short length of crystalline conduit, with subtle but significant differences from the originals. Harold examined it through the interface, nodding with satisfaction. "Now comes the tricky part," he said. "We need to replace the damaged sections without interrupting power flow to critical systems." Zella stepped forward. "I can reroute power temporarily through secondary pathways." Working together, they began the painstaking process of replacing damaged conduits. Harold directed the operation, utilizing the neural interface to monitor power fluctuations and structural integrity, while Zella made the actual connections. Hours passed in concentrated silence, broken only by terse technical exchanges. As the twin suns set outside, bathing the ship's interior in crimson light, Harold installed the final primary conduit. The moment he sealed the connection, the ship came alive around them. Systems that had been dormant surged with energy. Lights brightened, interfaces activated, and a melodic hum filled the air. "Primary power restored," announced a synthesized voice. The ship's AI. "All systems functional." Commendations to the stubborn mechanic and researcher Zella. Harold removed the neural interface, blinking as his perception returned to normal. He felt drained, yet strangely invigorated. There was something deeply satisfying about solving a problem this complex, about bringing something back from the brink of failure. Zella's skin rippled with patterns. He was beginning to recognize as pleasure or approval. "Your assistance has been invaluable," she said. "The ship can now complete remaining minor repairs autonomously." Harold nodded, suddenly aware of his aching back and the hunger gnawing at his stomach. He'd worked straight through the day without a break. "I've upheld my end of the bargain," he said wearily. "Now about that eviction." Zella gestured toward what appeared to be a rest area. "We will discuss terms after sustenance. You require nutrition and rest." Too exhausted to argue, Harold followed her. The ship provided a meal of sorts, nutrient capsules for Zella, and a surprisingly palatable synthetic protein for Harold. As they ate, Zella produced a flask of iridescent liquid. "Stellar bloom wine," she explained, pouring 2 measures into crystalline cups. "A rarity, even among my kind." Harold accepted the cup cautiously, sniffing the contents. It smelled of cinnamon and ozone. An odd, but not unpleasant combination. He took a tentative sip and felt immediate warmth spread throughout his body, followed by a clarity of mind that washed away his fatigue. "Not bad," he admitted. "Reminds me of a Martian whiskey I tried once. Nearly went blind for a week, but it was worth it." Zella's skin flickered with what might have been amusement. "Your species has a peculiar relationship with recreational chemicals," says the woman drinking star juice, Harold retorted. A companionable silence fell between them as they sipped their drinks. Outside, the desert night had fully descended, visible through a viewport that showed a canopy of unfamiliar stars. "Your technical aptitude is exceptional," Zella said finally, "particularly for a species at your development stage." Harold shrugged. "Been fixing things since I was tall enough to reach a toolbox. Never met a machine I couldn't figure out eventually." "Yet you claim to be retired." "I am retired," he insisted. "Or I was trying to be. Spent my whole life solving other people's problems. Thought I'd earned some peace and quiet." Zella studied him with those reflective eyes. "Why did you choose this particular location for your solitude?" Harold considered the question, warming to the alien wine. "It was cheap and remote. No one to bother me. No desperate calls in the middle of the night from people who've neglected their equipment for years, then expect immediate miracles. You resent being needed. I resent being taken for granted, he corrected. Being treated like a tool instead of a person. Being expected to drop everything because someone else couldn't be bothered to perform basic maintenance. Zella's skin pulsed thoughtfully. Yet you derived satisfaction from repairing my vessel. Harold couldn't deny it. Despite his exhaustion, he felt more alive than he had in years. The challenge, the problem-solving, the successful outcome. It had awakened something in him he'd thought long dead. That's different, he muttered. Your ship is a marvel. Working on it was interesting. Perhaps retirement does not suit you as well as you imagined, Zella suggested. Harold drained his cup, not wanting to admit she might be right. Doesn't matter now. You'll be taking back your outpost and I'll be somewhere else. Zella refilled their cups. I have been considering an alternative arrangement. What kind of arrangement? My research requires periodic absences from the outpost, she explained. During these periods, the facility would benefit from maintenance and security. Your technical expertise would be valuable in this capacity. Harold eyed her suspiciously. You're offering me a job? I am proposing a mutually beneficial arrangement. You would retain residence rights to a portion of the outpost. In exchange, you would maintain the systems and assist with technical aspects of my research when required. You would have access to advanced technology and considerable autonomy. Why would you trust me with your research facility? We just met, and I was squatting on your property. Zella's skin rippled. The ship's AI evaluated your neural patterns during the interface. You possess both technical aptitude and ethical stability. You are trustworthy, despite your gruffness. Harold snorted. So your computer thinks I'm a decent sort. That's reassuring. The arrangement would include one additional benefit, Zella continued. Galbonian medical technology could extend your functional lifespan considerably. Harold stiffened. Not interested. When it's my time to go, I'll go. As you wish. The offer remains available should you reconsider. Harold swirled the iridescent liquid in his cup, considering the proposal. On one hand, it wasn't the peaceful retirement he'd envisioned. On the other, the thought of working with technology this advanced was undeniably appealing, and he would still have his solitude for much of the time. I have one condition, he said finally. No forced samples, no experiments on me, and I maintain veto power over any research I consider ethically questionable. That is 3 conditions, Zella observed, her skin flickering with what Harold now recognized as amusement. But they are acceptable, with a single caveat. Routine medical monitoring is necessary for your safety when working with certain equipment. Harold nodded slowly. Fair enough. We have a deal, then. They touched cups in a gesture that seemed universal across species. To unexpected partnerships, Zella said. To recalibration, Harold replied, surprising himself with the sentiment. The journey back to the outpost the following morning was considerably easier. Zella had activated a personal transport device, a hovering platform that carried them swiftly across the copper dunes. Harold sat cross-legged on its surface, holding onto the edges as the desert blurred beneath them. As they approached the dome, Harold noticed something different. The structure seemed larger, more complex, with additional sections that hadn't been visible before. What happened to the outpost? He demanded. I remotely activated its full configuration, Zella explained. What you occupied was merely the dormant state, a basic survival shell. The complete facility includes research laboratories, enhanced living quarters, and storage areas. The dome had transformed. Additional structures had unfolded from what had appeared to be solid walls, creating a complex that was at least 3 times larger than the simple shelter Harold had purchased. Inside, the change was even more dramatic. Spatial folding, similar to the technology in Zella's ship, had revealed rooms that previously hadn't existed, Advanced laboratory equipment, comfortable living spaces, and sophisticated environmental systems now occupied what had been a Spartan interior. Your personal effects have been relocated to the primary living quarters, Zella informed him, leading the way through the expanded facility. The western section will remain your private domain. The eastern laboratories are my research area. Central spaces are communal. Harold followed in stunned silence. His meager possessions had indeed been arranged in a spacious suite that put his previous quarters to shame. Spike, the cactus, sat on a shelf near a large viewport, basking in the light of the twin suns. "This is not what I expected," he admitted. "Our arrangement is not what either of us expected," Zella replied. "Adaptation is necessary for optimal outcomes." Over the following days, Harold explored the expanded outpost, while Zella established her research protocols. They developed a rhythm of shared meals and separate work, coming together occasionally when Harold's expertise was needed for some technical aspect of her studies. The dome systems were far more complex than Harold had initially realized, incorporating technologies he'd never encountered before. Each new discovery fed his innate curiosity and problem-solving drive. He found himself making improvements, optimizing systems that had been functioning adequately, but could perform better with minor adjustments. Zella observed these modifications with interest. "You cannot resist improving mechanical systems, can you?" Harold, elbow deep in an environmental regulator he was upgrading, grunted. "If something can work better, why not make it better?" "Even in retirement, you remain a fixer," she noted. "Guess it's in my blood," he conceded. One evening, as they shared a meal in the central common area, Zella asked about his memoir. "Your documented experiences could provide valuable insights," she said. "The practical applications of theoretical principles often reveal possibilities overlooked by pure researchers." Harold shrugged. "Just stories about an old man keeping things running when they should have failed. Nothing special." "I disagree," Zella said, her skin pulsing with emphasis. "Improvisation and adaptation are crucial scientific skills. Your memoir could serve as an important cross-species technical reference." The idea that his life's work might have value beyond his own species had never occurred to Harold. He found himself returning to the manuscript with renewed enthusiasm, adding details he'd previously considered too technical for general interest. Weeks passed. The twin suns rose and set. The copper desert shifted with windstorms that rattled the dome's reinforced structure. Harold continued his improvements to the outpost, while Zella conducted her research. They developed an unexpected camaraderie, exchanging technical knowledge and occasional personal insights. One night, during a particularly violent sandstorm, they sat in the common area with glasses of stellar bloom wine, listening to the wind howl against the dome's exterior. "You never explained why this specific location is so important to your research," Harold said. Zella's skin rippled thoughtfully. "We are positioned at the precise intersection of 3 geomagnetic field lines. The unique particle interactions here cannot be replicated elsewhere on this planet." "And what exactly are you hoping to discover?" "A method of energy production that does not deplete resources or produce harmful byproducts," she replied. "My preliminary findings suggest that the particle anomalies here could lead to a revolutionary approach to sustainable power generation." Harold nodded appreciatively. "Noble goal. Though I've heard similar promises before. Clean energy is the eternal carrot dangling just out of reach." "Perhaps for humans," Zella said. "My species has achieved several breakthroughs in this domain. This research represents the next evolutionary step." "And you're willing to share this technology if you succeed?" Zella's skin displayed a complex pattern Harold couldn't interpret. "Scientific knowledge benefits from dissemination, within ethical constraints. Certain technologies require appropriate developmental stages to prevent misuse." "In other words, you'll share what you think we can handle," Harold translated. "Precisely," Zella confirmed, without apology. "Just as you would not give explosive materials to a child." Harold couldn't argue with that logic. given humanity's history. Fair enough, he conceded. Though I'd like to think we're at least teenagers in the cosmic scale. Adolescence, perhaps, Zella agreed, her skin flickering with amusement. Prone to risk-taking and poor long-term planning, but capable of surprising insights and creativity. Harold raised his glass. To the teenagers of the galaxy, then, may we not blow ourselves up before we grow up. Zella touched her glass to his. Indeed. The storm raged on outside, but within the dome, an unexpected peace had settled. Not the empty solitude Harold had sought in retirement, but something richer. A purpose, a connection, a reason to keep fixing things. Months passed. Zella's research progressed, yielding promising results that occasionally required Harold's assistance with equipment modifications. His own projects evolved as well. The memoir expanded to include their partnership, and he developed several innovations that improved the outpost's efficiency by integrating human ingenuity with Galbonian technology. The dome became not merely a place to wait for death, but a laboratory of cross-species collaboration. Harold found himself looking forward to each day's challenges, to the problems that needed solving, to the improvements waiting to be made. 1 year after their unexpected meeting, Zella prepared for a research expedition that would take her off-planet for several weeks. Before departing, she presented Harold with a small device. A communication link, she explained. Should you require assistance in my absence? Harold accepted the device with a gruff nod. I'll keep everything running smoothly. Don't worry about the outpost. Zella's skin pulsed with what he now recognized as affection. I am not concerned about the facility. I am ensuring your well-being. The admission surprised him. I've survived worse than a few weeks alone in a luxury dome. Nevertheless, the link remains active. My vessel departs at dawn. After Zella's departure, Harold settled into a comfortable routine of maintenance, writing, and tinkering with various systems. The silence he had once craved now felt somewhat empty, but he filled it with projects and the occasional conversation with Spike. 3 weeks into Zella's absence, he experienced a sharp pain in his chest while upgrading a cooling system. The pain intensified, radiating down his left arm. Heart attack. He recognized the symptoms from his military training decades ago. Harold stumbled toward his quarters, fumbling for the communication device Zella had given him. As his vision blurred and his legs weakened, he managed to activate it. Medical emergency, he gasped before collapsing. Consciousness returned gradually. Harold found himself in the outpost's medical bay, a facility he'd rarely entered. Diagnostic equipment hummed around him, and a holographic display showed his vital signs stabilizing. The dome's AI spoke in its melodic tones. Cardiac events successfully mitigated. Emergency protocols implemented per researcher Zella's contingency programming. Harold tried to sit up but found himself gently restrained by a force field. Recovery requires complete rest for 24 hours, the AI informed him. Tissue regeneration in progress. Tissue regeneration? Harold repeated weakly. What did you do to me? Minimal intervention using authorized Galbonian medical technology. Damaged cardiac tissue has been repaired. No life extension procedures implemented, per your stated preferences. Harold relaxed slightly. At least she'd respected his wishes about not prolonging his life artificially. Researcher Zella has been notified, the AI continued. She is returning to the outpost. Returning? But her expedition has been temporarily suspended. Your well-being was designated Priority Alpha in her absence protocols. Harold didn't know how to respond to that. The idea that Zella would interrupt important research for his sake was unexpected. 2 days later, her ship landed outside the dome. Harold, now recovered enough to move around with assistance from a hovering support device, met her at the hatch. You didn't need to come back, he said by way of greeting. I'm fine. Zella's skin pulsed with patterns he recognized as concern and relief. The AI indicated complete recovery, but visual confirmation was necessary. She studied him intently. You objected to the medical intervention? No, Harold admitted. Just surprised by it. And by your return. Our arrangement includes mutual support, she stated simply. Your continued function is important. The admission hung in the air between them, carrying more weight than either acknowledged openly. Well, Harold said finally, since you're back, I could use your help with the Eastern cooling system. I've got some ideas for improvements. Zella's skin rippled with what might have been a smile. Of course you do. Life at Outpost Gamma. 14 resumed its rhythm. Zella continued her research while Harold maintained and improved the facility. His heart gave him no further trouble, though he sometimes caught Zella surreptitiously scanning him with medical devices when she thought he wasn't looking. His memoir neared completion, expanded now to include his unexpected second career as a research assistant to an alien scientist. The title had changed as well. Recalibrations, a mechanic's journey across the stars. One evening, as they shared stellar bloom wine and watched a meteor shower through the dome's viewport, Harold reflected on the strange turn his retirement had taken. You know, he said thoughtfully, when I bought this place, I was looking for somewhere quiet to die. Somewhere I wouldn't be bothered by people wanting me to fix their problems. Zella's skin pulsed with interest. And now? Harold considered the question, watching the meteors streak across the alien sky. Now I'm thinking that fixing things isn't such a bad way to spend whatever time I have left, he admitted. Turns out I'm not very good at doing nothing. Few sentient beings are, Zella observed. Purpose sustains consciousness more effectively than comfort. Is that a Galbonian saying? Personal observation, she replied. Though my species has a similar concept in our philosophical traditions. Harold nodded, sipping his wine. When I was young, I used to think I'd invent something revolutionary, change the world, leave a legacy. Instead, I spent decades just keeping things running, patching and repairing instead of creating. An undervalued but essential function, Zella said. Creation without maintenance leads to abandoned potential. Like this outpost before you returned? Precisely. They fell silent, watching the last of the meteors fade. I've been thinking, Harold said finally, about that medical technology you offered when we first made our arrangement. Zella's skin flickered with surprise. You were quite emphatic in your refusal. I'm not talking about extreme life extension, he clarified. Just maintenance. Enough to keep me functional a while longer. He gestured around the dome. I've got projects to finish, improvements to make. Might need a few more years than nature intended. The technology is available whenever you decide, Zella said, her skin pulsing with what might have been satisfaction. Minimal intervention, as you prefer. Harold nodded, feeling strangely at peace with the decision. Not a desperate grasping at immortality, but a practical choice to maintain his usefulness a while longer. To recalibration, he said, raising his glass. Zella touched her glass to his. To maintenance and creation. Outside, the copper desert stretched endlessly beneath twin suns, constant, yet ever-changing. Within the dome, an old human mechanic and an alien researcher continued their unlikely partnership, each finding in the other something neither had expected, a reason to keep fixing what was broken and to build something new from the parts. 1 year after Harold's cardiac event, Zella submitted her research findings to the Galbonian Science Consortium. Attached to her formal report was an appendix, a technical evaluation of the outpost's enhanced efficiency due to human Galbonian collaborative engineering. Integration of human intuitive problem-solving with Galbonian theoretical frameworks has yielded a 23% improvement in overall system performance, she wrote. The research assistant's unorthodox approaches have accelerated several aspects of the study, particularly in practical applications of the particle effect. She hesitated, then added a personal observation. The human tendency to repurpose existing technology for unexpected functions has proven remarkably effective. Their species' historical resource limitations appear to have fostered adaptive creativity that complements our more systematic methodologies. In the outpost's western section, Harold put the finishing touches on his memoir. The final chapter described not an ending, but a continuation. A stubborn old mechanic finding renewed purpose among the stars, and an alien researcher discovering the value of human improvisation. Life, like machinery, requires constant recalibration, he wrote. Sometimes the most effective repair isn't fixing what's broken, but reimagining what it might become. He saved the manuscript and closed his terminal. Through the viewport, the copper desert glowed in the light of setting suns. Soon, Zella would return from her laboratory for their evening meal and the ongoing exchange of ideas that had become the unexpected pleasure of his so-called retirement. Harold Finch, 76 years old and counting, reached for his walking stick, still the same alien bone, now polished smooth from constant use, and rose to his feet. There was a slight modification he wanted to make to the environmental controls before dinner. Nothing urgent, just an improvement. Another small fix in a lifetime of repairs. And for the first time in decades, that thought brought him nothing but satisfaction.